Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I've just gotten word from my team that everybody is good to go. We're good to go on cable. We're good to go virtually. And so I'm going to tap my virtual gavel in just a moment.
All right. Good morning.
Does anyone have a second feed up? I hear feedback.
Tap my virtual gavel.
Okay, I think we're good.
All right. Good morning. My name is Kenny McDuffie, at-large council member and chair of the council's Committee on Business and Economic Development. Today's Wednesday, February 12th, 2025, and we're convening this hearing via Zoom, given the inclement weather that we're experiencing in Washington, D.C. today. The time is 9:35 a.m., and I'm calling to order this hearing. Today marks the committee's third performance oversight hearing, and we're hearing from government witnesses at the following agencies and entities: Destination DC, the Alcoholic Beverage and Cannabis Administration, as well as the Real Property Tax Appeals Commission. We will begin with opening statements from any of my colleagues who happen to join us this morning before moving to our government witness testimony and any questions that will follow from me or any of my colleagues. As a reminder, any government witnesses who are going to be testifying as primary witness will have 7 minutes to provide their opening testimony. First, we're going to hear from Destination DC. Destination DC is a private nonprofit corporation that serves as the lead organization to market Washington, D.C., both domestically and internationally, as a premier global destination for conventions, tourism, and special events. A contracting arm of Events DC, the organization is funded by a percentage of DC hotel occupancy tax, along with membership dues and cooperative marketing fees. By developing and executing centralized and cohesive sales and marketing strategies, Destination DC generates economic development for the district through tourism. I'm going to call our governor to just check to make sure nobody has joined. Sad, no council members have joined this morning, correct?
Not yet.
All right, we're going to turn to our witnesses for Destination DC. Our first witness is President and CEO Elliot Ferguson and Board Chair Meade Atkinson. Good morning to both of you. Thanks for joining us this morning virtually, and you can begin your testimony.
Okay, and good morning to you as well. Sorry that we're not there in person, and thank you for the tease in terms of who we are. Again, I'm Elliot Ferguson, President and CEO of Destination DC. And as was referenced, our key goal is economic development through tourism and, of course, conventions coming into the city. 94% of our budget, as was referenced, is tied to the hotel tax generated by visitors that are coming into the city. And as we reference on a regular basis, the efficacy of our efforts are tied to the numbers. $10.2 billion in overall expenditures, 26 million visitors, and over $2 billion in taxes, supporting over 100,000 jobs. Our mission clearly is to increase the impact of the economic development of business through tourism for Washingtonians. About $2 billion in tax revenue comes from those visitors that are coming to Washington. Again, Councilmember McDuffie, thank you again, and to the mayor and other city leaders for the Tourism Recovery District dollars during a pivotal time tied to the recovery of COVID. It really meant a big deal in terms of us being able to promote and focus on Washington on a global level. It increased our budget by 1%, which took our budget to $26.2 million, with an overall budget of $56 million to promote DC as a destination. I think that most people look at that number and say, wow, that's a lot of dollars that Destination DC has. But as you look at what we do and how we focus on promoting DC from a global perspective and compete against other cities like Orlando, whose convention bureau budget is north of $80 million and has an organization called Visit Florida, whose budget is also north of $80 million, we are still behind in terms of what we should be spending as a first-tier city, but very optimistic and very happy with where we are compared to what we had before. For us, it's all tied to our marketing and return on investment, which we measure on a regular basis in terms of how effective our marketing is. As a destination, our city has a perception problem, which we continue to focus on a regular basis. The recent campaign, There's Only One DC, gives us a chance to focus on promoting DC through a different lens, the 100 plus free things to do, shopping, nightlife, sports, theater, neighborhoods, and the list goes on and on. I think as we look at what we focus on 14 years ago with the Chief Financial Officer's Office, our board of directors, and others, we embarked upon a return on investment study that basically gave us insight as to how effective our marketing is and what and how the city benefits as a whole. The campaign specifically has generated over $547 million in expenditures from visitors coming to the city, $47 million in tax revenue to Washington. So the question always is, do we need to market Washington and is it effective? And the answer based on the data is always yes. The return on investment study also said that for every dollar we spend on promoting DC as a destination, there's a $2.09 return on investment, which means basically the city has additional dollars to spend on key things that are important to Washingtonians like myself, like healthcare, security, safety, road recovery, snow removal, and all of these other key things. As a destination, globally, Washington is the 7th most visited destination by the global community coming into the US. Number 1 through 6 would be cities like New York, Miami, Orlando, Las Vegas, San Francisco, and LA. And then, of course, Washington, D.C., Honolulu's behind us, Chicago's behind us, and a lot of other major cities such as New Orleans, Philadelphia, Boston, and the likes. In that regard, the Tourism Recovery District dollars has given us the wherewithal to increase the number of offices and representation that we have globally. Before the TRD, we had offices in China, India, Australia, and New Zealand. With the Tourism Recovery District dollars, we now have offices additionally in Japan, Brazil, Mexico, Canada, and an office in the UK that focuses on the international efforts to bring conventions to the city. All those offices were in Washington last week for our global market analysis and interface with stakeholders and members of the community that really focused on how effective we will be as a destination and as a nation in terms of bringing international visitors to the city. Next week and the week after, I'll be embarking upon a trip to Asia, to China specifically, the first in a long time, with our office there as we constantly focus on recovery of a key market such as that particular area. For us, it's about working with key stakeholders, such as Events DC, the Restaurant Association, and of course the Hotel Association. And you heard last week from Angie Gates and her team in terms of things in which they're focusing on. And as a reminder, Destination DC is the organization that focuses on bringing conventions to the convention center and to individual hotels in the city. So we work closely with them and other key stakeholders in that regard, which is extremely important to us. The redevelopment of key projects such as RFK Stadium is a big deal for us as sports plays a huge role. Kudos to you in terms of your efforts, your successful efforts, and branding DC as the official sports capital, which we absolutely agree with. And we have greater opportunities as we look at new projects coming on board, including the redevelopment of RFK, which is important to us. In the next few months, we'll be focusing on all things tied to World Cup, tied to FIFA Club World Cup, World Pride coming to the city, working with the mayor's office of LGBTQ, the LGBTQ community, and Capitol Pride celebrating their 50th anniversary as we look at the 2 million people coming into Washington from outside of the region and an additional 1 million coming from the region as a whole. 2026 for us, it's all about America's 250. We just did an event 2 weeks ago with the mayor and other key stakeholders at the archives, focusing on our efforts to promote the U.S. and other parts of the East Coast, with Washington, D.C. as the key city for the world for the 250th. For us, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all things tied to the diversity of Washington plays a huge part of how we promote our city. The American Experience Foundation is our nonprofit that focuses on ways in which we make sure that youth and high schools in Washington, D.C., and those that are interested in going into college understand the dynamics of our industry as a whole. And it's my pleasure to be supported, as you referenced, by Meade Atkinson, who's the chairman of our board, our Chief Marketing Officer, Robin McLean, and our Chief Financial Officer, John Kim, who are also on this call as well. Working with key organizations and schools in Washington, D.C. are a huge part of what we do, including Howard University, UDC, and the D.C. public school system. And as I close, I will say that I've been in the organization doing this for 24 years in Washington, over 35 years as a whole. And the positive impact of visitation on Washington and the economic impact of what we do continues to resonate in a positive way. We hear it from citizens. We focus on ways in which we bring more visitors to the city, especially international visitors, because they stay longer and spend more. And with that, I will conclude testimony and will be happy to answer any questions that you or anyone may have.
Okay. Thank you for your testimony, Elliot, and thank you to the others on your team who joined this morning. I don't know, Meade, were you planning to provide any testimony this morning, or just to support and answer any questions?
Are you asking me, council member?
Yeah, I was asking whether you had planned to provide testimony.
I sure did.
Oh, perfect.
Yes.
You can go ahead and provide your testimony. Good morning to you.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, Council Member McDuffie. And I guess there are no other members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development yet. Oh, yes, there are. Hello. My name is Meade Atkinson, and I am Destination DC's chair. I've been on the board for a number of years, and I'm also the area manager for Sonesta Hotels. Like many of the hotels in the city, we work closely with Destination DC and benefit directly from their efforts at increasing visitation into the district. It is their mission, and they are real pros. Adequate funding has been a real handicap historically, and as we go up against the other major U.S. convention and leisure markets, historically, it's been a challenge. As their chairman and on behalf of the board, we appreciate everything this group and the City Council did to pass the Tourism Recovery District legislation. Not only is it a catalyst for the future, but it really helped lift us out of the last phases of COVID. We were able to increase our own taxes and put them to use in things such as the Only One DC campaign that Elliot just referenced in terms of its success. I really want to commend Elliot and his team for what they do every day, and notice and know that they have that they now have the tools to both increase conventions, which is really important to the city and to hotels, as well as to amplify and coordinate meaningful events this year, like World Pride and the FIFA Club Cup. He is one of the hardest working men in destination marketing. All of their efforts are scrutinized as well, as Elliot referenced, through an ROI lens each year. And so we can confidently say that for every dollar we invest, it generates $2 for the city in taxes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony this morning as well. I do have some questions that I'd like to ask, and some of them are just to really highlight, I think, some of the testimony that I heard from both of you this morning that I think needs to be really shared broadly with members of the committee and the public who follow these hearings about how monies are being spent to attract tourism to the District of Columbia. So I want to begin with really a follow-up question from one of the public witnesses who provided testimony to the committee, a name that is all too familiar to you all and somebody who I've worked with as chair of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. But Solomon King, who's you all know well, president of the Hotel Association of Washington, D.C., submitted testimony to the committee regarding Destination DC. And Mr. King wrote in support of extending the tourism recovery tax that you both touched on in your testimony, and which I introduced in 2022 to support Destination DC and its really important efforts to return tourism back to the District of Columbia after the pandemic. So just for the record, there are a lot of folks who tune into these hearings who are less familiar with all the inner workings of Destination DC and all that you all do. So I think it might be important to sort of level set, if you could, Elliot, and explain how you all have utilized this tax revenue, and if you all are requesting any changes to the tax as of today.
Absolutely. And again, I appreciate the question. You know, the T word tax is always a scary one as it pertains to what we do and how those dollars are used. I will remind those that are listening that the funding mechanism for Destination DC is really twofold. One, the hotel tax is paid for by visitors that are physically checking into a hotel in Washington. And as we look at the percentage in which we receive, we use those dollars strictly to promote DC for conventions and tourism. And then, as you referenced, we're a membership-based organization. So the remainder of our funding comes from those dollars paid by those members that we also use for various reasons. What the hotel, the Tourism Recovery District dollars has allowed us to do is post-COVID really be more effective in terms of going after those visitors that the global community are going after. I mean, we all, as a globe, were impacted by COVID. Everything was shut down. And then there was an immediate rush to try to get visitation back online. As we looked post-COVID, if you want to call it post-COVID, but as we recovered in 2021, we saw more visitors coming into the city, which we were happy about, mostly domestic visitors coming into Washington, D.C. on average spend less than $700. International visitors coming into Washington, D.C. spend north of $2,500 plus. So we had a lot of domestic visitation, which was extremely important. But with the Tourism Recovery District dollars, we were able to take what we did before, do more commercials domestically across, East Coast, West Coast, versus limiting it to specific markets that were always performing for us. And as was referenced, continue that outreach with offices in which we opened in international destinations, which is a big deal, especially going after the international market, whereas they're making a decision to go somewhere, as they say, fun, or coming to Washington for a federal experience and then going somewhere else fun. We were able to really focus on how we expand their perception of Washington, the cost of coming here, because of course we have 100 plus free things to see and do that are free, the ease of getting from the various airports into the city, and all aspects of hospitality benefited. The hotel tax is the only tax in which we benefit from, which means we don't get any dollars from restaurant taxes or others that are created through hospitality. And so, as you can imagine, Solomon and the Hotel Association are very much so in line with or wanting to know what we're focusing on as they deal with advocacy efforts. They rely on us in terms of marketing, heads and beds, as Angie Gates referenced several times last week, which then tends to lend itself to butts and seats in restaurants and theater and sporting events and the likes. So all aspects of hospitality benefited from our efforts. I would say, especially as we look at who spent, the dollars that are created through those that are staying in hotels, which is a larger amount of revenue that the city benefits from as well. So the Hotel Association has very much so been invested in what we're doing. There is a committee that they've put in place that has oversight that we meet with a couple times a year to talk about what we're doing, as well as meeting with DMPED and other key stakeholders such as Events DC in terms of how we're spending those dollars.
Appreciate that. I want to sort of stay on it. Well, let me also note, Okay, I see him on screen. We're joined by Ward 3 Council Member and friend of the committee, Matt Fruman. Thank you for joining us, Council Member Fruman. We're going to go ahead and turn to you now then for a brief opening statement before I actually continue my round of questions. If you want to go ahead and provide an opening, Matt.
All right. Thank you very much, Chairman McDuffie. I don't have much of an opening statement or questions, but I did want to weigh in and thank Director Ferguson and Robin McLean for all of the work that's being done on America 250, DC 250. I heard you talk about it in your testimony. This is a giant opportunity for the district to let people get to know not just the monumental core, but all of our neighborhoods, and to tell our story. And you all have been doing a great job in that effort. We don't have a lot of time, and the landscape has gotten a little bit trickier, I think. But I'm really looking forward to working with you and others to try to make that something that is as meaningful as possible for all of our communities. And so more a comment, more an expression of thanks than questions, but I wanted to put that on the record and encourage you. Let's work together going forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Fruman. Really appreciate that. I want to turn back to some questions, Elliot and team. In your pre-hearing responses, you stated that the fiscal year 2025 estimate of the overall tax collection maybe less than fiscal year 2024, and that the variance in Destination DC's budget could potentially be up to $3 million. This is obviously very concerning given, I think the testimony you provided today, but also in past oversight hearings about sort of your budget relative to other similar tourism, hospitality entity budgets around the country. And so I want to really just, if I could, clarify a few pieces on the record. Before I'm going to continue my question, I do want to note that we've been joined by Ward 5 Council Member Zachary Parker. Good morning to you, Council Member Parker. Thanks for joining. Do you want to do an opening? You prefer to do a round of questions? I'll just jump right in to questions. Okay. All right. Well, let me go ahead and can we do a clock with 7 minutes, team, please? Director Ferguson, on the record, if you could, which tax specifically are you referring to in your pre-hearing answer that you provided to the committee?
Yeah, we're referring specifically to, and I'll rely on John Kim to fill in the blanks, our CFO. But what we do is we base our budget on what the CFO's office tells us or anticipates collections will be in a given fiscal year. Mm-hmm. So whatever is anticipated at the beginning of the fiscal year, which for us is, and you in City Council is 1st of October, we base our budget, and whatever changes that they make based on variables in which they're looking into, we alter our budget accordingly. Sometimes in a perfect world, they're more conservative, and at the end of the fiscal year, we have done much better than anticipated. But in cases like now, with a lot of variables in place in terms of traffic coming into the city, in a new inaugural year, we normally see more visitation from corporate business and from those coming in for advocacy efforts, as well as a larger number of conventions, larger number of smaller meetings that are taking place in hotels, those that are coming to do advocacy work on Capitol Hill. But there are sometimes indications that there might be some pitfalls tied to visitation that the CFO's office looks into. And then John and team kind of looks into those as well. We monitor them, adjust our budget if necessary. And then we, in 6 months into the fiscal year, which is coming up very soon, make those necessary adjustments. And that's kind of where we are. And John, I'll stop there and let you answer add anything to that.
Thank you, Elliot. Good morning, Mr. Councilmember McDuffie. My name is John Kim, CFO of Destination DC. As Elliot referenced, Destination DC closely monitor DC CFO's revenue estimate, which is published quarterly, and we set our FY25 budget based on their September revenue estimate. But as of December end estimate, it appears that FY25 hotel tax collection seems to be flat over 24, and that's where this comment is coming from. And what that means to Destination DC, we have received about $48 million of hotel taxes in fiscal year 24.
What's that number, Mr. Kim? I'm sorry.
$48 million of hotel tax collection to Destination DC, not the overall hotel tax collection. But we planned about $52 million in our FY25 budget. And that difference is what was referenced earlier, about $3 million of swing if it indeed year FY25 turns out to be flat.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you for that.
Now, I will say that as we look at that data and we respect and trust what the CFO's office tells us, again, sometimes they're very conservative, and in a perfect world, they're wrong. As we're looking at our budget that is set in September of last year for fiscal year 2025, what I say to the team is let's continue to focus on all the things in which we have in place for 2025, including markets in which we want to rebound, markets in which we're going into, and then May, June of this year, we'll look at whether or not we should make some necessary adjustments and take it to our board of directors. So at this point, nothing has changed other than my CFO saying, this is something you need to be aware of. And me saying to the team, sales, marketing, and advertising is a priority. Let's continue to focus on what we have in the budget for 2025. Being mindful of the fact that there might be some shortfalls in which we might have to take back to our board of directors.
Yeah, just to sort of clarify a bit, when do you think, at what point in this budget year do you go back to your board of directors and really think about modifications to your plan for fiscal year 2025?
What we say to the board, and my chair, Mead, who's on the call, is that by March, April, of course, that's the 6-month period for fiscal year 2025, we'll determine where we are with collections versus expenditures. And keeping in mind that we're then getting our collections for the softer months, which are December, January, February, plus or minus inauguration business. And we had some really strong conventions that took place in January. And then we'll look at, the traffic tied to the Cherry Blossom Festival in the beginning of the spring season and all the great stuff that happens during that time frame. We won't realize those collections until, John, correct me if I'm wrong, about 60 days later. So it could be May or so. And then we will look at how we're doing versus what was forecasted by the CFO, what we forecasted at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then talk about what are the next steps in terms of our budget to make sure that we are in a good place at the end of fiscal year 2025.
Okay, thanks for that.
Chairman McDuffie, can I add something to
Alderman
Keene's testimony, if I could?
Sure, please.
I think for in terms of background, one of the challenges that hotels face in DC is that business travel is still not back anywhere close to where it was prior to the pandemic, and it doesn't look like it will be for a long time to come. Other cities, it's not the same. New York City is doing much better, and a lot of the other cities are either doing better for some reason with business travel, or they're just so tourism focused that it doesn't really matter. But the fact that it's so far down in DC, it makes Destination DC's marketing efforts that much more critical to keeping occupancy in the city up, to keeping the hotel business healthy, which keeps everybody employed, quite frankly, because as soon as it drops, one of the quickest things to be affected is people's jobs. So
sure. No, I appreciate that. And I'm going to stay on this line of questions, but rather than jump back in and have you all provide me an answer that well past my time, I'm going to turn to Councilmember Zachary Parker, who's joined us this morning. Good morning to you, Councilmember Parker. Thanks for joining the committee's hearing. I'm going to turn to you for a round.
Thank you, Chairman McDuffie. And it's good to see all of you from the Events DC team. Mr. Ferguson.
Destination DC, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Destination DC. Yes, it's early in the morning, but I'm going to start with you all. And I want to first start with appreciation for the great work that you all continue to do, driving business for the city and interfacing with international markets. I think this is an entity that doesn't quite get the attention that it deserves. And I wanted to attend today both to clarify some things in the pre-hearing responses, but also to allow you all to brag on yourselves a little bit. First, I wanted to start with World Pride, which is fastly approaching, and it will be an event that could see 2 million plus people here in the district and the region, and will spur a significant amount of economic activity in the district. I noted in your pre-hearing responses, you discussed some of the work that you're doing. One concern I have is that the event is essentially 3 weekends long or 3 weeks long from May 17th to June 8th. How are you marketing that type of event? And or are you targeting one weekend to tell people to descend upon the district, or are you hoping that they will stay for the entirety of the event?
Very good question. I think that what we're doing is we're looking at what happened the last time America hosted World Pride, which was 2019 in New York City. Clearly, we're two different types of destinations, but the global community is going to come to support traditionally World Pride simply because of all of the programmatic activity associated with World Pride. And I say that specifically because there are different buckets. There are those that are coming for advocacy. There are those that are coming for health-related education, if you will. There are those that will be coming for the sports-related components that have been added this year. The 50th anniversary of Capitol Pride, which in itself attracts a large global community and domestic community. And of course, all of the fun activities, the entertainment that is already announced and will continue to be announced. So that's my way of saying we promote the entirety of World Pride coming to Washington, D.C., realizing that individuals are going to pick and choose when they want to come based on the audience or the particular component of the LGBTQ plus community that is being celebrated. It's a celebration encompassing all aspects of the community, but as I remind people, it's a celebration of everyone coming to the U.S. from a global perspective to celebrate the community. But there are components that are tied to the trans community, Black Gay Pride, and the list goes on. And we'll make sure that those visitors that are looking at when should I come know the full scope of everything that's being planned so that they can make their decision as to when they want to come. And that's also inclusive of things that are happening in the city above and beyond World Pride, because that's one of the great things about Washington is that you can come for World Pride, but while you're here, you can also attend theater, you can attend some of the other events that are happening in the city. So that's our goal overall.
That is helpful. And I think it's instructive for us here on the council, as I imagine we may want to tweak things, especially following the lead of Councilmember McDuffie, that we perhaps want to target the entirety of the event versus, as some might, try to focus on just the latter part. So that is really helpful. I noted in your pre-hearing responses, you noted that we should raise nearly $800 million in economic activity with the 2+ million people that visit. Like, what estimates on the return for our investment are you all conducting or have rather? And like, how do we manage to ensure it's a success? One level of success is, are people coming to the district? I imagine for you all, your level of success is, did it spur people eating in our restaurants, staying in our hotels, sticking around and pouring money into our economy? So can you just talk about like the economics behind how you're analyzing to ensure this is a successful event for the district?
All right, I'll start off and then pivot to Robin McLean, our Chief Marketing Officer. It all starts with occupancy in hotel rooms. It's similar to on inauguration and other key events. How busy is the city? What's the percentage of occupancy and the room rate that individuals are paying over the time frame of World Pride? That's the low-hanging fruit in terms of measuring the economic return on investment. And then, of course, looking at restaurant taxes generated and other taxes generated. Any study tied to ROI, return on investment, is not done by Destination DC. It's always done by an external organization. We work in tandem with other key organizations. If we're looking at something that's on the National Mall, we rely on the National Park Service to verify the number of attendees for an event on the National Mall. Robin and her team work with external organizations in terms of ROI, and Robin, I'll let you finish from there.
And before you pivot, just quick follow-up question. Do you have an estimate of how much money Destination DC has put into marketing World Pride?
If you would allow, I'll still pivot because Robin
Yes.
will be able to give more insight as to what we're doing from a marketing perspective and what our tourism team has done. I will say that as we've looked at promoting Washington, we've been domestic and global in terms of going out and promoting World Pride during other Pride celebrations in the US and globally. We started that last year. We've done it with the mayor's office. We've done it with Capitol Pride, and we've done it with our offices in global communities. And Robin, you can take it from here.
Yes, I wanted to just share that we have been promoting World Pride for the last couple of years. So last year, for example, during Pride activities throughout the world, a lot of those happen in June. We were in markets like LA and New York, Atlanta, with lots of out-of-home advertising around those parades and really targeting people who are attending those Pride events so that they would be inspired to come to Washington, D.C. So we've been out. We also did these things in London and supported advertising throughout the world to really share about World Pride coming this June, May and June. I think one of your other questions was about how do we look at that economic impact? And yes, Elliot touched on it, I think, pretty thoroughly. But it's also a reminder of if there are the 3 weeks and people can pick and choose, maybe some folks come more than once. Maybe they choose an event and then they stay longer because of the number of events that are happening in the city. And so it's like an international traveler who stays longer and spends more. That's what we're hoping to do, is to drive people, inspire them to come here, but drive that business so that they are staying longer in our hotels, spending more at our restaurants and other venues.
Thank you. That is my time. Thank you all.
You're on mute.
Sam, you're on mute.
Okay. Thanks, Donnie. What I was actually saying, ironically, was that I was having a challenge hearing Robin when you were testifying. It was a bit muddled, just slightly. I wasn't hearing you clearly, and I wasn't sure if it was me or did other people have that same challenge.
Other people also had that challenge.
Okay, all right, got it. All right, thanks.
Sorry.
No worries, no worries. I'm gonna, in your pre-hearing responses, you describe your fiscal year 2024 advertising effectiveness study. And the key takeaways there, and while Destination DC saw an overall higher total tax revenue generated for the district in FY26, the $2.09 tax return on investment is much less than the $3.49 tax return on investment in FY23. And I wanted to give you just an opportunity to talk about why you believe that to be the case.
I'll start, and I'm hoping that Robin's audio will be better, but I'll be happy to answer anything that may not be clear by what she's saying. But the study is done every single year by an external organization, and they're how they go about determining the efficacy of our marketing is they literally reach out to those that have traveled, that are looking at traveling, and they answer key questions in terms of how impactful was it, the messaging, there's only one DC, in terms of influencing their decision. There are a couple ways in which people come to DC. As Mead referenced, business travelers come, their spouses or significant others say, hey, I want to come because of the pandas. There are those that physically are sold on an international trip to the US, and DC is a part of the package. And sometimes that package is a day trip. If we're successful with our marketing, they go to Washington.org, they look at other things that are going on, and they say, we don't want to make DC a day trip going down from New York and then catching a flight the same day to go out somewhere else. We want to do more things in the city and stay longer because DC has more to offer. And that's a long story in terms of how we do our outreach with our offices and what I'll be doing when I'm in Asia the week after next. And then the other is, of course, those that we influence to come, as we work to bring conventions to the city, they stay longer, they bring their families, et cetera, and we're able to influence that. The study gives us a chance, and it's very, very conservative because some states and cities are boasting that for every dollar spent, there's a $25 return on investment. We are extremely, extremely conservative simply because we don't ever want to come under scrutiny in terms of saying how realistic is that number, but it is also done by an external organization. I'll let Robin share with you the difference, the delta between the year before and this year, and what they've shared with us as to why that delta exists.
Okay.
I hope you can hear me better. I did try to switch up my mic. The difference truly is that it's more about how much money we spent on advertising and the reach. There's much more impact this year. We generated record visitation spending through our advertising, and we generated record tax revenue for the city. So I don't want that to be lost because of the Delta variance between the 349 from a year ago and the 209 that you're for every dollar spent on advertising. The truth is that we reached more people, and so as a result, we had greater impact. And I think that's the best I can explain it in terms of it.
Well, no, I appreciate that. I think it's helpful. It's just looking at the numbers on the face of them, I think begs the question about sort of return on investment. So because I'm following those numbers and I'm seeing the increase of visitation to the District of Columbia, and I really appreciate that, but want to make sure that we understand when we see numbers like the ones that I referenced that you all just explained. Let me ask about the marketing campaigns, which I know you talked a bit about in your opening testimony, Elliot. But I think it's also important to understand how you all are really promoting the district. I know you all are doing this, but I want to hear you talk about how you're doing it, promoting the district beyond the federal enclave, and how you all are promoting marketing some of the other corridors that tourists can visit outside of that federal enclave in the District of Columbia, and whether, frankly, there's some strategy, I imagine there is, but a strategy behind the targeting of domestic tourists versus international tourists. Is everybody getting the same message, or are you really tailoring those marketing campaigns and utilizing those dollars more effectively to target the international tourist that you articulated earlier spends more and stays longer when they visit?
Absolutely. I think the key thing with our marketing is that, to your point, one size does not fit all. But one thing for sure is that visitors coming to Washington, D.C. want to be exposed more than just a federal experience. I love monuments, memorials, museums. That's always on the minds of visitors that are coming to the city, but exposing people to the music scene here, namely go-go, namely jazz, the new museums that are opening, the 51 Steps tour. It is imperative for us, especially with the international community, to recognize what is appealing to them. And what's appealing to them is going into the neighborhoods, going outside of the immediate area of the city. And the 23 years I've been here, I've gone as far as saying let's not have monuments, memorials in our advertising, even though that references that you're in Washington, D.C. But the more we talk about the international scene of Washington, D.C., namely, if you put 5 Black people next to each other in Washington, chances are 20 to 60% of them may not even be from the United States. Therefore, we are a global community that is influenced by global food, global culture, and we should be proud of that. Let's look at the food scene. Let's look at things that are historic to Washington, D.C., and utilize all those things in our marketing because that's appealing to a global community.
Okay.
I'll make this short. As we had our offices in just recently, what our office in China said in terms of consumer sentiment about coming to the United States, therefore coming to Washington, D.C., versus what our offices in New Zealand, Australia said, totally separate. So when I'm in China, anything and everything that we're concerned about from the standpoint of politics does not resonate as much, but it will in other parts of the U.S. But we still have to deal with, the ease of getting a visa to come into the U.S., and other variables in which we've talked about as well during the summit last week, and then apply that to different parts, including our office in Mexico, which is very much so bullish on visitation coming versus Canada, whereas they're saying, we're not sure how Canadians feel about traveling into the US right now.
Got it. I'll just tease. I'm going to pivot to some questions around sports tourism. I really appreciated seeing some of the information how you all are approaching this, but I want to get on record just with some of the excitement that we have in the district right now, seeing sort of sports grow, the transfer of RFK, potential return of the Washington Commanders. I really want to dive into that, so just want to tease that. But my time has expired for this round, so I'm going to turn to Councilmember Parker for another round.
Thank you. I know you spoke earlier about needing more money. Can you elaborate on that? Like, if you had your wish, how much more funding would Destination DC receive, and how might you use that funding to deepen your impact around the world?
Councilmember Parker, I'm not remotely correcting what you said, but I want to put emphasis on the fact that the more we spend on promoting our destination, the larger the economic return on investment is for Washington, and recognize how the Tourism Recovery District dollars, which we received and are still receiving, has allowed us to be more impactful in terms of promoting our destination. And as the Hotel Association referenced in his letter, Solomon Keene, the need to look at making sure that we continue to be bullish in terms of promoting Washington. That being said, the more we spend, the more the larger the return on investment is for the city. And the goal for me is for you all being stakeholders, elected officials, to recognize that impact. Talk to your peers in other cities that are spending larger amounts and seeing the return on investment in terms of visitation, which is good for the city as a whole.
And what's the gap between us and our nearest peer city in terms of spending on marketing and advertising?
Yeah, the biggest gap is tied to the major first-tier city and their budget, plus the state organization that focuses on promoting the state. And I referenced earlier my counterpart in Orlando, their budget is well north of $80 million just for the Convention Bureau. And then Visit Florida, their budget is well north of $80 million. So when you see ads on our TV in the morning, you might see a Visit Orlando ad, or you might see a Visit Florida ad. And that does not even include the massive budget that Disney has, the massive budget that Universal has, and SeaWorld. Whereas our key assets in the city, namely our museums, have limited budgets to do what we do. So in essence, it's us or no one in terms of our marketing. As you look at other key cities, I'll go across the country, the LA, same thing, larger budget. Visit California's budget is north of $100 million. So when you look at how they are positioning themselves and the key cities within those states, they're clearly able to do more. I was just looking at the number of offices that Los Angeles has globally, and I was looking at it with envy. Before the Tourism Recovery District dollars, we had 4. I'm very fortunate to say that we now have 8. I'd like to see more. I'd like to see more representation because that means a better return on investment in terms of how the global community looks at Washington as a destination.
And what you're saying makes me think as there's a potential economic downturn for the district, and our budget is likely to be a bit tighter. We could take a gamble on the district and investing more dollars to bring more tourists to the city and therefore to kind of bridge the gap that we're seeing in our budget. So thank you for that. And I'm certainly sure that's top of mind for a lot of folk as well. I want to try and cover a few more areas before this round is up. International tourism. I just wanted to go over those numbers again. I was a bit shocked that there were about 2.2 million international visitors in 2024, which I believe was up nearly 1.5 million from 2023. Was that right?
That is pretty accurate, yes.
So it was that because of the pandemic, or are we suggesting that only 500,000 international guests visited the district before last year?
No. I'll say that as we look at the visitation to Washington, about 7 to 8% of all visitors are international. What we're trying to do is increase that number. And if you look at Washington compared to New York City, about 20+% of the visitors that are going to New York City are international. So therefore, they're seeing a larger return on investment in the total number of people going into New York, simply because they're spending more because they're international. We did see lower numbers, and we're still recovering, especially in Asia post the pandemic. A lot of reasons. You can't. If I want to fly from China, when I fly to China in a week or two, I've got to go to San Francisco and then do a layover. And unless I choose to fly Air China, simply because domestic carriers cannot fly over Russia and they cannot fly over Pakistan. So that's a whole nother area of issue in terms of why international visitors are choosing not to come to the East Coast of of the United States, simply because it's not as easy as it was before the pandemic, because we had more nonstop flights above and beyond Air China and Air India in those respective countries.
I got you. That just struck me as a very low number, given that we are in many ways a global capital, if not the global capital in the world. I want to cover two more topics very quickly. I saw the numbers for the conventions through 2026. Are these numbers for 25 and 26 confirmed, or are these projected numbers?
Those are conventions that are confirmed in those particular years. And then there are others that are like in 2026, 2027, there are a couple of tentatives that the team are working to close, not only for the convention center, but keep in mind, as we talk about the larger congresses that come to the city, the bread and butter are the smaller meetings that take place in the individual hotels. And we're still receiving several leads for that type of business to come to Washington.
Got it. Now I'm going to put on my committee chair hat for the Committee on Youth Affairs. I noted that you received the hospitality grant from DMPED and you're working with partners in that space. I'm going to venture to guess that you're likely not working with vulnerable or at-risk youth as part of that grant. And maybe I'm wrong, but can you just speak to how might we target more of our homegrown at-risk youth, trying to bring them into the hospitality field, especially those that may have trouble gaining employment elsewhere?
Yeah, we work really closely with DC the DC public school system, Chancellor Farabee, his team, and others in terms of identifying schools that specifically focus on hospitality and neighborhoods in Washington, whereas we're exposing kids. Whereas the economics of those communities aren't as robust as other parts of Washington, to expose them to opportunities. I'd be happy to share with you what we do through our American Experience Foundation in that regard, and how the funding that we receive from DMPED, who we work really closely with Nina Albert and her team, simply because the American Experience Foundation has been very, very effective in terms of exposing youth to career opportunities, whether they choose to go to college or not, offering scholarships once they finish high school. So there's a whole lot that we're doing in that space. And Councilmember Parker, when you and I meet, I'll be happy to share with you a lot more about how effective the foundation has been and working with DC public school system and others.
I love it. I am at time. And I would just add, hopefully we can also incorporate some of our young people that are caught up in the criminal justice system, giving them an opportunity to turn their lives around. Those are two different things, DCPS, and some of our young people in the criminal justice system. But thank you again for the work that you're doing at Destination DC.
I appreciate that, sir.
Thanks, Councilmember Parker. I mentioned earlier I wanted to turn and talk a little bit about sports tourism. It feels like it's growing in the district. I know anecdotally, I see in the energy growing. I see the fans getting excited about some of our teams, some of the new team sports, or not necessarily new, but just some of the ones that are less traditional: rugby, ultimate frisbee, flag football. But we also, obviously, with the success of the Washington Commanders, I've seen a lot of things associated with that success. And so, with the transfer of RFK and the potential return of the Washington Commanders, it feels like there's room for our tourism to grow even further. I see that you all track hotel room generation for sporting events, but I'm curious about what steps, if any, you take to promote sports within the District of Columbia, how it ties into your overall approach to marketing in the city.
Absolutely. Our international offices and domestic offices said it best. Sports are attractive to visitors. And in that regard, we really work with Events DC and others. We have a team in place here that plays a huge role in how we position packages when we're bidding for sporting events to come to Washington, D.C. And it's extremely important to us. We look at the economic impact of it. As you know, I was in Atlanta from 91 to 2001. The Georgia Dome opened the year that I arrived. I saw the impact of the Georgia Dome. And it was shocking that, within 20 years, it's now gone. And now they have the Mercedes-Benz Dome, and how they have been able to really capitalize on that infrastructure, including hosting the Olympics, which I was there for, simply because that infrastructure existed. So these major events are huge to the international audience, as we talked about Club Cup for World Cup that we're hosting this year. A lot of momentum about that. A lot of momentum as we talked about World Pride, the sports component of that. And we know for a fact that the global community will travel for sporting events. You talked about Ultimate Frisbee. We've worked really closely with the organizers and owners of teams of those events in sports, simply because they are appealing. And as we work with the leadership of the key infrastructure in the city that already exists, they're very appealing. As we look at RFK and we look at the Commanders, and I'll just put it out there, the potential for a dome stadium coming into the city, that's going to bring huge economic opportunities for the city, as well as how we are appealing to the global community and domestic community that want to come to Washington. There's so much momentum with concerts now. I was just talking, I'm not in that space, but, just listening to the momentum of the Beyonce tour and the economics of these huge tours on global communities, which is studied, and the opportunity for Washington, D.C. to be a part of that. I will say that we are truly positioning ourselves, as you referenced, to be a sports capital of the world.
Yeah, great. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear you mentioned RFK specifically, the potential for a dome stadium to be in the District of Columbia, in the nation's capital, where I think the Commanders rightfully belong, but also how it ties into our overall strategies of really marketing our world-class city. I also think about concerts too, and I brought this up with a question on oversight to Angie Gates and Events DC last week. But when you think about concerts, you think about Beyonce, you think about Taylor Swift, although I was rooting for the Eagles, not Kansas City this weekend. But you think about those big concerts, the 50, 60,000 seat concerts. I also think about, other markets like LA and other parts of the country that have venues that they seat 50, 60,000, but they also have venues that seat 40,000, 20,000, 10,000, and just think about the potential. And she brought this up. She said she was having conversations about, with DC United and potentially, covering that stadium. I found that intriguing. I don't know if that are you all tied into those types of conversations? Is there any sort of collateral flow between you and Events DC around those types of conversations, given that concerts, I think, are something that attracts people to the District of Columbia, both domestically and sometimes when you have the big names, probably internationally.
Absolutely. But we're also, and we are tied to the actual venues themselves. The Cap One Arena, the new Care First Arena, newly named. We work closely with the Nationals. The CEO of Audi Field, she's on our board of directors. So we are in lockstep with not only those venues for sporting events, but also for concerts, as they're very much so actively involved in what we do. I think the key thing for us is infrastructure. As we look at some of the venues that you referenced, the venues in LA are great. But when you think about being able to get to the venues in Washington, D.C., we've just met with Randy, the CEO of Metro, and what they're planning to do. What we know that needs to happen as we talk about infrastructure, Washington lends itself to a more user-friendly destination for those global visitors and domestic visitors that are wanting to come for those big events. And the key is, we talk about Taylor Swift and Beyonce because they've been studied globally, and they should. That's just the beginning. And what if we were able to have that type of atmosphere for 4 or 5 concerts, keeping hotels full, restaurants full, Sean Townsend and his team, as well as all the other stakeholders that really benefit from those types of events that are coming to the city. The global, as we talk about, we know that we worked closely with the Ghanaian football or soccer team coming to Washington last year, and the opportunity for that to continue to build momentum and more folks coming domestically and internationally to Washington. That's a huge deal and a large economic footprint for Washington as a whole.
Yeah, and you just mentioned soccer, so I think it may be appropriate. You touched on a bit earlier, but the Club World Cup is coming to Washington, D.C. This year. A lot of excitement, a lot of energy around that. What steps, if any of you all, taken to prepare the district as a host city, and how involved are you with the FIFA host committee? And I don't know, just talk a little bit about your all's role in that, and how you all are preparing for it, if anything, and just whether you need any additional support from the city around that.
Always appreciate the support. Our key thing is, how do we continue to engage those once we know the teams that are coming, engage our global audience, our global offices. I mean, people will come from all over the world because soccer or football is by far the largest sport in the world. And the key thing is to make sure, again, those that are coming for the games are also aware of how amazing Washington is above and beyond the games themselves. So to your point, ours is all tied to marketing our community, whereas they know that they can have an amazing food experience in historic Anacostia, plus go to the Go-Go Museum or do go to U Street for historic value, do the 51 Steps tour, which is up and coming, which is amazing. And so that's our goal. How do we make sure that those that are looking at coming, the nice thing about Club Cup is that it's coming to Washington, D.C., but even in 2026 with World Cup, again, nonstop flights to Washington, D.C., get off the plane, take the Silver Line into the city, spend a day or two here, and enjoy things that we're offering you before you get on the flight and go to, or get on the train to go to Philadelphia or Boston or New York, where they're played there, or other parts of the U.S. or North America. So that's our goal, and that's what we're doing. And again, our team, our sports team, is working with Events DC, but of course at the table with FIFA in terms of how do we position Washington to be a successful host of Club Cup coming to the city.
And if I can add to that, one of our hotels is actually benefiting by having 3 teams. And it's not only attracting, but you all help, Elliot, your team helps a lot with coordinating, giving us perspective on what their expectations are, So it's not just the marketing, it's the pull through and making sure that we're all talking to each other.
Thanks for that. Appreciate that. Let me turn to Councilmember Parker and see if you'd like another round. Okay, I'll keep.
No more questions for this round, but I'll stick
All
around.
right, thank you. All right, appreciate it. Appreciate it. Probably have just a few more questions to go, actually. My colleagues have already asked some of the questions that I intended to ask around World Pride and international tourism, so I will not be redundant in that regard. I'll ask, though, about the district, really being a hub for arts and culture in the region and host to many festivals such as the National Book Festival and Otakon. Talk a little bit about the role that you all play with potential partners. I mean, Events DC, I think, is obviously one of the natural partners that you talked about throughout the course of today's hearing. Any other partners? Does Destination DC have specific marketing plans for getting more people, tourists, to come for these types of arts and cultural events? I'd be curious to hear, and then just think about like theaters. We talked about concert venues and things like that, but just talk a little bit about arts and culture and how you all integrate that into your work.
Absolutely. We've been working with Deputy Mayor Albert and her efforts. One, I respect and appreciate the fact that she sees it all as economic development, because it is. Arts and culture plays a huge role in that regard. We've been working closely with the DC Office of Arts and Culture as they're looking at new events that they're bringing to the city. But we've always looked at, I'm on the board of the Jazz Festival, and we play an active role in all things tied to arts and culture, again, as a way to attract people to Washington above and beyond their experience on the National Mall. So we're in lockstep with what's happening. The key thing for a lot of the institutions to do with us is to make sure we're aware. We're an organization with 1,000+ members. And as I remind the members, they've got to tell us about everything that's happening in the city. If it's Step Africa, which we love, and it's really appreciated by global visitors and domestic visitors, we want to know about those events and activities so that we can promote them on Washington.org, which is the #1 way in which they benefit from our efforts. The H Street Festival, the list goes on and on. We're not in the planning of those events because that's not what we do, but we are absolutely in the, I remind people, we'll market the heck out of anything that we know that visitors can benefit from when they're coming into the city. And those that are coming for conventions, we want them to know that the auto show's in town, or while they're here for a convention, there is a festival that's happening that is, or restaurant week is happening in the city that benefits visitors coming to Washington.
Okay. That's one of the questions I asked of all the agencies and entities that appeared before us, but I wanted to ask this of you. Does the Events DC Destination DC have a primary and secondary sexual harassment officer, and has Destination received any complaints of sexual harassment in fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 to date?
Yeah, I heard Angie Gates' reference to that. We like several organizations, we take it seriously. We don't have a designated person with that title, but we have it incorporated in our people and culture position that we have within the organization. We've not had any complaints in regards to sexual harassment. We do a lot of training, and we stay in the space of making sure that we tell our employees at that Destination DC is a safe space. And in that regard, there is a lot of dialogue about the proper way to communicate if there are issues in the workplace, as well as the proper way to behave in the workplace.
Is there a policy, though, that specifically outlines the proper way to behave, or at least to navigate in the event that a person wants to file a complaint?
There absolutely is. And we want people to, we want our team members, all 120+, to know that we take those allegations or concerns very seriously and want them to speak up if there are concerns.
Okay. I'm not sure if you shared that pre-hearing. Can you share that specific policy?
Sure.
I would be like to see it and want to make sure it spells out specifically the steps that an individual could take if the need arises, and if you don't have a primary secretary sexual harassment officer, whether it's really clear to a potential complainant how they would navigate that challenging time. So I'd love for you to share that with the committee.
And we absolutely will. It's articulated in our handbook. When we do our onboarding, we spend a lot of time on this subject as a part of the onboarding process, and it's continuous education that is mandatory for all members of our team to undergo in terms of matters such as this.
Okay. Could you run down what your CBE spend has been for this past fiscal year and what your goals are so far for this year?
Absolutely. My CFO is I'm going to ask him to maybe be specific about what our spend is.
Sure. Good morning again, Ms. Council McDuffie. We have worked with 11 CBE businesses during fiscal year 24. The total spending came out to be just north of $5 million during fiscal year 2024, which specifically referring as part of our TRD agreement that certain dollars has to be spent with the CBE. What we have agreed with DSLBD for FY24 was $3.8 million. So we way surpassed that goal. And for 2025, we are on our way. Our goal is $4.5 million. And so far, year to date, we have spent over $3 million in total.
Okay. You mentioned TRE agreement. I'm not sure.
It's a tourism recovery district dollars that allowed them to receive one.
Okay. All right. I got a little bit lost in the alphabet, so appreciate you clarifying that. I don't have any additional questions at this time. Is there anything else that you would like to add to the record at this time before I transition to the next agency, Elliot?
I just would say, again, we appreciate the support, appreciate working with your team. They made this process very easy. Sorry we're not doing this in person. And as Councilmember Fruman was on earlier talking about America's 250, I do have the pleasure of serving on the committee with him. I know that he was at the press conference that we did recently. So the support overall of City Council and your leadership is extremely important to us. So we appreciate you giving us a chance to come and testify in front of you and others in terms of what we do for Washington, D.C. We are always working to improve upon how we position Washington as a destination, and as such, how we work with key stakeholders in the community. So your leadership is important. We thank you. I've got a great board of directors, as you see with Meet Atkinson as the chair, but the Restaurant Association, the CFO's office, Nina Albert, the Hotel Association, Events DC, they're all on the board of Destination DC. So as members are listening and engaged and asking questions about our spend and what we're doing, our primary goal is to make sure that our key stakeholders understand the importance for us to communicate and to have an open door policy in terms of what we're doing and bring everyone under the tent as best we possibly can. So thank you, sir, for your support.
Thank you, and thank you to your entire team, all the folks who testified this morning, Robin McLean, Meet Atkinson, John Kim, and others. We appreciate it. Thank you, my colleagues, for joining this part of our hearing. We're going to transition now to our next agency. We're going to hear from the Alcoholic Beverage and Cannabis Administration, or ABCA. The mission of ABCA is to support the public's health, safety, and welfare through the control and regulation of the sale and distribution of alcoholic beverages and medical cannabis in the District of Columbia. ABCA conducts licensing, training, adjudication, community outreach, and enforcement efforts to serve licensees, law enforcement agencies, advisory neighborhood commissioners, civic associations, and the general community so that they understand and adhere to all the district's laws, regulations, and ABCA policies. ABCA also conducts regulatory and settlement agreement compliance inspections, underage drinking compliance checks, and joint investigations as needed with various district agencies, such as the Metropolitan Police Department and the Fire and Emergency Medical Services Department. With that, I'm going to turn to our government witness for this agency, Director Fred Musali. And actually, I didn't do it the last time, but as I always do, and regret that I didn't swear in Elliot Ferguson and his team, I'm going to now ask you virtually, Fred Musali, if you could raise your right hand and anybody else who's testifying with you be sworn in. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to provide before the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you for that. Begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Thank you.
Good morning, by the way.
Thank you, Chairperson McDuffie. I appreciate that. Just for the record, Rebecca Berry, our agency fiscal officer, is with me as well. So she is the other person with APCA today. Just wanted to get that on for the record.
Okay. How about we just knock out? I don't know if she plans to testify, but I might as well swear her in now rather than.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. If you can turn on your camera, unmute yourself.
Yep. Let me see. Where's my camera? Okay.
There we go. All right, perfect.
Hi.
Do you swear, if you could raise your hand, do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to provide before the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you as well.
Good morning.
I'm going to turn it back over to you, Director Musali, to provide the testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson McDuffie, members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development, staff, and members of the public. My name is Fred Musali, and I am the Director of the Alcoholic Beverage and Cannabis Administration. I am pleased to say that APCA and the Alcoholic Beverage and Cannabis Board have made a meaningful difference over the past year as the district continues to expand its medical cannabis program, take enforcement action against unlicensed cannabis establishments, and also make improvements in the way that alcohol is regulated. As discussed below, the agency and the board are also focused on doing their part to improve public health and safety in FY25 and in future fiscal years. Today, I would like to share some of the board's recent initiatives and rulemakings in FY24 and thus far in FY25. I will then discuss APCA's FY 2024 successes, following specifically on the agency's recent accomplishments in the areas of enforcement, licensing, community outreach, and adjudication. The board, under the leadership of Chairperson Donovan Anderson, has continued to operate effectively and efficiently in carrying out the board's responsibilities. This is impressive as the board significantly increased its workload in FY24 and FY25 to date. As a result of the board holding for the first time hearings on summary closure notices and cease and desist orders issued to unlicensed cannabis establishments. Additionally, the board continued to increase the number of protest hearings held and the number of settlement agreements reviewed regarding medical cannabis retailer applications. Just as significant, the board has added 3 members since October 2024 who have seamlessly transitioned and excelled in their new roles. The board, working collaboratively with the council and the mayor, has made numerous improvements to the district's medical cannabis program in FY24 and in FY25 to date. This included the board issuing emergency rulemakings to 1, set guidelines for how medical cannabis facilities may post signage and advertise their businesses. 2, establish criteria that must be satisfied for testing laboratories and license holders to remediate medical cannabis and medical cannabis products that fail testing. And 3, keep the registration card free for qualifying patients and caregivers until March 20th, 2025. In addition to rulemaking changes, the board issued on August 16th, 2024, its long-awaited first medical cannabis testing laboratory license. The testing laboratory is currently in operation and testing cannabis products received from licensed cultivation centers and manufacturers. The testing laboratory is critical to ensuring that medical cannabis products are tested for harmful contaminants and that the potency of THC levels contained on the packaging of labeled products is accurate. With regard to enforcement, APCA is proud of the efforts and accomplishments of its enforcement division this past year, which has continued to work in the field enforcing various alcohol and medical cannabis statutory and regulatory violations. APCA's enforcement division conducted an impressive 11,813 regulatory inspections and investigations of alcohol establishments in FY24. This significantly exceeded the agency's FY24 goal of conducting at least 11,000 regulatory inspections and investigations of alcohol establishments. APCA was also successful conducting 592 compliance checks for underage drinking in FY24. This exceeded the agency's goal and represented an increase from FY23. APCA's Enforcement Division also issued 1,021 citations to licensed alcohol establishments in FY24. In FY24, APCA's Enforcement Division continued to monitor and inspect the district's licensed medical cannabis cultivation centers and retailers. The agency conducted approximately 64 inspections of all operating medical cannabis cultivation centers and dispensaries in the district, with each visited at least once a quarter, 100% of the time in FY24. This exceeded the agency's target goal of 92.9% for FY24. Additionally, as part of the district's multi-agency cannabis enforcement task force, APCA conducted over 160 investigations and inspections of unlicensed cannabis establishments, which resulted in the issuance of 102 written warnings, 43 cease and desist orders, and now 27 notices of summary closure. For FY25, APCA is pleased to announce that the agency received a sub-grant from the district's Department of Transportation Highway Safety Office for a second straight year in the amount of $250,000, with a $50,000 match from APCA. APCA's portion of the sub-grant is intended to help reduce underage drinking in the district and will allow the agency to conduct an increased number of compliance checks in FY25. With regard to licensing, APCA staff did an excellent job in several areas. For example, APCA's licensing division was able to keep up with the online processing of digital medical cannabis patient registrations. In FY24, the licensing division issued 12,558 registrations to patients, and as of January 1, 2025, the division issued 6,553 registrations to patients. With regard to alcohol licensing, APCA staff also deserve credit for the quick and effective processing and issuance of temporary and one-day substantial change license applications. Specifically, 99.3% of temporary and one-day substantial change applications were issued within 15 days or less in FY24, which exceeded the agency's goal of 90%. Additionally, in FY24, APCA's licensing division processed and approved more than 250 Class A alcohol license renewals for retailers, wholesalers, and manufacturers. APCA's licensing division also processed extended hours for several special events in FY24 and FY25 to date. This included APCA registering approximately 63 alcohol establishments for extended hours for Art All Night and Dine All Night in FY24. Additionally, in FY25, APCA's licensing division issued extended hours registrations for 33 licensed alcohol establishments for Inauguration Week. With regard to community outreach, APCA continued to be proactive with offering community outreach and education, trainings and presentations at no cost to provide accurate and timely information to the public. APCA was able to train 427 members of the public in FY24. This included APCA holding multiple information sessions in FY24 for social equity and standard applicants regarding the various medical cannabis open application periods. APCA also attended 82 community meetings in FY24 on license application, enforcement, and other agency-related issues. APCA also partnered with other district agencies to offer several helpful information sessions in FY24. This included APCA co-hosting with the district's Department of Behavioral Health an information session in FY24 for alcohol license establishments on encouraging their staff to be trained in opioid overdose prevention and to have naloxone on hand to administer in the event an opioid overdose occurs. In FY25, APCA conducted 3 well-received training courses in February 2025, the last session which ended yesterday, for newly elected and re-elected ANC commissioners on the agency's existing licensing and enforcement processes for both alcohol and medical cannabis. Additionally, APCA will be offering ID compliance training on Monday, February 24th, 2025 at 10 a.m. to help prevent underage drinking by reducing youth access to alcohol through retailer education. With regard to adjudication, APCA's Office of the General Counsel was highly productive in assisting the board with adjudicatory matters and rulemaking decisions. In FY24, more than 630 board orders were written by APCA's legal staff. In FY24, the board approved 116 new or amended settlement agreements that resulted in a board order. APCA's mediation specialist also mediated 49 cases this past fiscal year, with approximately 83% of the cases mediated in FY24 being resolved with either a settlement agreement or the filed protest being withdrawn. APCA's OGC also successfully worked with the board in drafting numerous rulemakings and legislation in FY24 and FY25 to date, covering a variety of medical cannabis and alcohol topics. This included working with the board on rules extending the Langdon Park moratorium zone in Ward 5 and implementing the new North Shore moratorium zone. Furthermore, APCA's OGC also worked with the board on an emergency and proposed rulemaking to implement recent changes made by the council to the district's medical cannabis law. Looking ahead, I would like to focus my discussion on 4 of the agency's ongoing initiatives for 2025. These are on-premise liquor license renewals, the upcoming licensed establishment statutory March 31, 2025 deadline, establishing a permanent streetery endorsement process, and last, the omnibus alcohol bill. First, APCA's busiest renewal period since 2022 starts on February 18th, 2025. Over 1,500 liquor licenses are due for renewal by March 31st, 2025. These include restaurants, hotels, theaters, arenas, boats, clubs, and caterers. APCA is kicking off its renewal season next week by emailing out renewal notices to all eligible on-premises retailers. Once APCA receives an application from an establishment, the agency will provide the public with a 45-day public comment period. Specifically, APCA will provide public notice by 1, posting 2 red placards on the outside of each retail establishment, 2, sending written notice to ANCs and the council, and 3, publishing renewal notices on APCA's website in the DC Register. A late fee of $50 will be assessed for each day a licensee is late to renew its license, not to exceed the cost of the license. Second, APCA is preparing for the upcoming March 31, 2025 deadline that requires all remaining unlicensed establishments that apply during the statutory open application period to have their retailer or internet retailer license issued and be in operation on or before this date. There are approximately 33 retailers and internet retailers remaining that apply during the unlicensed establishment statutory open application period that need to open on or before March 31, 2025, or have their board approval rescinded or have its license application denied by the board. To assist with this process, APCA issued written guidance for transitioning unlicensed establishments prior to the end of January 2025. This written guidance has been posted to the APCA website and is being posted in the DC Register. Third, APCA would like to work with the committee and the council to establish a permanent streetery endorsement process. APCA's streetery endorsement, which has been in effect for several years, is currently set to expire on Thursday, July 31st, 2025. On November 19th, 2024, the mayor submitted to the council the Streetery Program and Protest Process Amendment Act of 2024, which would establish a permanent streetery endorsement and provide for a 45-day public comment period and allow for community input on the endorsement application. This legislation will be resubmitted for the new council period, and APCA looks forward to continued discussions with stakeholders on this important issue. Fourth, APCA is preparing for the submission of the 2025 Omnibus Alcohol Bill to the Council. The proposed legislation seeks to make it easier for alcohol licensed restaurants to open in various parts of the district. This long-awaited legislation is currently expected to be submitted to the Council for consideration in spring 2025. In closing, I would like to thank you for your leadership and support, as well as the hard work of the committee staff. Our agency appreciates the opportunity to share our accomplishments and plans for FY25, and we look forward to continuing working with the committee and the staff. I would also like to thank the board and the hardworking staff of APCA. I would not be able to share the agency's accomplishments here today and future plans, if not for the commitment made by the board and our staff to ensure that the work gets done. This concludes my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have at this time. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony, Director Musali. We appreciate it. I do have some questions, and we'll do a 7-minute round, staff, for questions. I first want to turn your attention, Director, to Cannabis Regulation Administration. As you know, and were present yesterday, we held a joint roundtable between the Committee on Business and Economic Development and the Committee of the Whole to discuss the state of the medical cannabis industry and enforcement against illegal cannabis shops. I want to follow up on a few outstanding questions that I didn't have the opportunity to ask there. So, how do you recommend that we unburden retailers that, due to the realities of just some of the challenges that they face in the district and their location in east of the river, end up servicing the majority of patients who are eligible for reduced fees?
Sure, I'm happy to work with the committee on that. Chairperson, you may have remembered we did previously look at a tax credit for those sales east of the river. I'm happy to revisit that with you. I think we would just need to work with the Office of Tax and Revenue to make sure it's something that they understand and can implement. I think that makes sense to look at. I think you remember that. We also had the 280E tax deduction in the law. Go ahead. Sorry, Chairman.
I think there might be a bit of a delay. I was just saying I do remember the conversation. You can finish your answer though, please.
Yeah, I think the other aspect I think which came up yesterday is there's a 280 tax deduction in that's just not funded. So that could be something we could, have a discussion on as well. But I think the credit for those east of the river is critical to look at, or some type of other incentive to get businesses to either stay or locate east of the river. So I'm happy to have that conversation with the committee.
Okay, yeah, let's do it as soon as possible in terms of follow-up. I certainly recognize the challenges that are unique to the particular operator who testified yesterday, where they're located, and we certainly want patients to be able to access that facility given its location in the District of Columbia in Ward 8. Moving on, do you anticipate that after the March 31st deadline, your agency will be able to shut down the rest of the illegal cannabis shops by the end of the calendar year? And how many medical cannabis investigators does ABCA need to actually close the remaining illegal shops by the end of this year?
Sure. So we have two additional medical cannabis investigators that we have identified that offers are in the process of going through doing background checks on that as a result of a job posting. So those two new investigators will give us 3 investigators. That will put us in position to close shops by the end of the year, as you stated. We'll obviously have to continuously have enforcement as new ones pop up. But those 3 investigators should put us in good position to close unlicensed establishments by the time frame you set.
How many alcohol investigators do you have on your team?
So we have 15 line investigators and then 4 supervisory investigator positions. So 19 total.
So 19 total. And how many cannabis investigators do you have?
So we have 1, and then we have the offers for 2. So that takes you to 3. And then we have another FTE we can hire for.
Well, let me ask then, because is it feasible for your agency, without running afoul of any employment laws, to transition any of the alcohol investigators to cannabis investigators to accomplish this goal, if additional FTEs are not identified?
Yes, that would be that's doable. That would be a conversation we would have with the union, but that'd be something we could work with the union to accomplish if necessary. Yes.
Okay. Can you broach that with the labor union? I'd love to understand how that might be accomplished and whether or not it's actually feasible. And then, are there any vacancies for your alcohol investigators?
For the alcohol vacancies, we have 15 slots that I mentioned. We have 13 investigators, the 15 in the building. The 14th slot we posted, did interviews for, identified a candidate who's going through the onboarding process. So once that candidate hopefully comes on board in the next few weeks, that'll take us to 14, and that'll just leave us 1 job to post, which we intend to post.
Okay, so talk about complaints to the office. How many complaints have you all gotten that are alcohol related? And I also like to know how many complaints you all have gotten that are cannabis related.
Sure. Well, it depends on what aspect you're talking about. So on the alcohol side, most of the complaints, which I think you'll see in our responses, are noise complaints. So we
Mhm.
get a ton of noise complaints. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to. On the cannabis side, we get a lot of complaints about unlicensed establishments. It's a lot from the
Mhm.
AMCs in the community.
Mhm.
They give us the names of businesses that are operating illegally. We have to explain to them whether they've been closed or that they have the March 31st date. And that's one of the important reasons not to extend the March 31st deadline, is we have to explain to the community that they have until March 31st to transition to
Right.
legal market.
Let me ask though, in terms of the complaints, what are the numbers? Do you have
Give me,
those? And
yeah, I
I'm
can, hold
deviating a
on.
bit
Yeah,
from
give
my,
me 1 second. I know we have those.
okay.
Hold
All
on.
right. I'll let you try to gather those while maybe your staff can help while I continue some of my questions before the end of this round. Have licensed retailers begun to test their cannabis at the district's first testing lab? And if so, are they seeing the same rates of amphetamines in their cannabis as the unlicensed shops?
So yes, so all product now has to be tested. So all product goes to the licensed testing lab from the cultivation
Mhm.
center manufacturer. That has gone smoothly. We're not seeing amphetamines in the product. So that's going extremely well. I did want to come back to your other question. So for FY24, APCA received 1,210 noise complaints. I can give you a breakdown by
Mhm.
word if you want it.
No, go ahead. 1,000.
210 in 24.
You said 210 or 1,210?
1,210.
Got it.
The
Okay.
breakdown by ward is Ward 1 was 616, Ward 2 was 159, Ward 3 was 20, Ward 4 was 129, Ward 5
Mhm.
was 95, Ward 6 was 97, Ward 7 was 8, and Ward 8 was 86.
Okay. So that's noise. What about cannabis complaints?
I do not have those for you, but we can get that for the committee.
Okay. And let me just be completely transparent as to what prompted that question. I really would like to know how you all are so receiving complaints, what the community is raising as concerns with the agency, and then how you all are allocating your limited resources in terms of staffing and investigating, right? If you've got, I think you said, I think 19 total, including managers in terms of investigators for alcohol, and then I think you said three, one in place, two you made offers to for cannabis. But a good deal of what you're dealing with as an agency right now is illegal cannabis shops. And what I heard from testimony from um, witnesses yesterday was the negative impact of the illegal shops on those who are following the law. Then it sort of begs the question as to whether you should be putting more resources and efforts into enforcement around cannabis. So that's why I asked the question. It's not trying to play gotcha. I know you
No,
all.
I appreciate you setting it forth that way. I think Chairperson McDuffie, clearly we need the additional two people, so no doubt. I think what's important to mention is that we do have a multi-agency team that goes out. We do have
Mhm.
MPD that does undercover buys. So even though there's only one supervisor investigator until these two new folks start, we have the multi-agency team consisting of DLCP, DOB, DC
Mhm.
Health, MPD that goes out. MPD also does undercover buys for us. So even though the investigator at APCA, because he's so well known, he does not do undercover buys. So we have MPD and then other district agencies that do the undercover buys and do the enforcement. So you're absolutely right. If it was just one investigator, couldn't do it all by himself, as excellent as he is. But we're fortunate to have the other district agencies partnering with them, and then MPD doing the undercover buys. That's what allows us to do this work. I think at the hearing yesterday, I focused the fact we've closed 10 unlicensed establishments in 28 days, right? So what's happened is the November 13th emergency legislation that you and the council passed has allowed us to pick up the pace of doing closures, and is going to let us get to the numbers and address that issue quicker. One of the things that I think people forget is that we started with education and warnings and cease and desist orders, and we've just recently gone to just doing closures, right? Because we're getting closer to that March 31st date. So I think it's important to highlight that it was necessary for that. The other thing I want to highlight, we have a lot of social equity businesses transitioning that we're working with. So we're kind of in a tough spot where we're saying, come to the legal market, transition as a social equity applicant. At the same time, we're tasked with shutting these businesses down.
Yeah, but I want to be mindful that I'm over my time. I fully appreciate that. I'm glad you put that on record. As a champion for the social equity component of the program, I certainly don't want to put them in a tough spot. But we also have been sort of in this phase of our cannabis industry in the District of Columbia for some time now. Since I think you opened it up maybe 2023, and we heard from some of the businesses that have actually taken that on-ramp that we created with your insights and working with my colleagues at the council, namely the chairman and others. It's been a while, right? We're approaching that March 31st deadline, and we have to leave that March 31st deadline in place and make sure that there aren't any inefficiencies or you eliminate the red tape to allowing those I-71 shops who sought to take that on-ramp and become legal, regulated shops in the district have been able to do so. If there, for some reason, you can point to that the agency has had challenges in keeping up with the rate of applicants, and I'd love to hear that. But if it is people who have waited, sort of taking a wait and see approach to this, then, while I understand why they may have done that, I can't really sympathize with their not having gotten the licenses to do this legally. So I am well over my time, but I wanted to.
Yeah, we agree with you
you
100%, Chairperson. We under no circumstances do we want to move the March 31st date. I think it's important to note, not that long ago we had 6 retailers in operation. Now we're up to 17. Most of those, if the majority of those are transitioning businesses, and many of those are social equity businesses.
Great. I appreciate that. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you. And it's good to see you again, Director. I'm going to pivot a bit. I wanted to talk about the APCA online complaint system and just getting clear about the communication that happens between APCA and residents as they file an online complaint about a venue or a business. So after a complainant makes a complaint via the online system, does APCA send any communication to them giving them next steps the agency will take regarding their complaint?
Sure, great question, Councilmember. Good to see you. So there is when you submit a complaint, you get a notification that your complaint has been received. That was one of the things important to me, that there's a acknowledgement by the agency that your complaint has been received. So most complaints, as I think I mentioned, the 1,210 are noise complaints. That's the bulk of what we get. So in all those, I mean, obviously there's always exceptions and things happen, but the bulk of those is to reach out to the resident who filed the complaint, because we have to go into the resident's home to verify the complaint. I don't want to get too off track in terms of legislative issues, but so we have to reach out to the complainant and verify the complainant. So
every complainant should receive a verification that their complaint has been received, and then someone from APCA will reach out to them to investigate their complaint.
That's correct.
And then
That's the expectation. I'm not going to tell you it's happened 100% of the time. I'm just telling you the expectation.
and then what is the expectation for communication between APCA and the complainant when the case is triaged for inspection or assigned to an investigator?
Can you explain that a little more?
So I'm assuming let's assume it happens as it's supposed to. So someone calls them to verify their complaint. I'm assuming this is then pitched to an investigator to go out to the venue or the business to investigate. Is there any communication between APCA and the original complainant to say our investigator is going out to the venue and we will follow up at X date or time?
Yes. So the noise complaints, the goal is to address those in real time. So the investigators work from 7 p.m. till 4 in the morning. So when we get a noise complaint, people want it addressed immediately, right? If they're trying to sleep. So that can happen a bunch of ways. Sometimes the resident wants us to come into their house, verify the noise, write it up. A lot of times they don't want us coming in their house at 2 a.m., which is understandable, and they just want the noise to stop, right? So we'll go to the licensed establishment, have them turn down the noise, let them know we've gotten a complaint. You can file a complaint anonymously if you'd like. And we work with the establishment to lower the noise, shut their windows and doors or whatever may be going, and to stop the noise. So oftentimes,
and then once that is completed, what if any communication is there between APCA and the original complainant? Let's say, here's the outcome of our investigation.
Yeah, so normally throughout this whole process, the investigator is in communication with the complainant, and then they let them know the result. If that makes sense.
That does make sense. Okay,
and then
so
I just do want one thing, and then I'll let you go. We do have a community resource officer that the ANCs and the public work with, and she will give them status updates of what's going on with their complaint as well.
So just repeating this back, when a neighbor makes a complaint, they should receive an automatic verification, and then shortly thereafter, someone from APCA should be reaching out to verify their complaint. There's then an investigation, and then at the close of that investigation, the neighbor should be receiving some communication directly from APCA or that investigator to let them know the outcome.
That's fair. What you just outlined is the case for noise complaints. Depending on the nature of the complaint, it may be a little later. I mean, because a lot of these noise complaints are happening at night, right? At 10 at night, 11 at night, at midnight. If we get a complaint that might not be as urgent, it's not going to be dealt with at 10 or 11 at night. It may be followed up at a later date, if that makes sense. Depending
No, that does make sense. What I'm getting at is I've heard complaints from neighbors that they file a complaint and it kind of goes somewhere,
Right.
and it's not always clear or apparent what the outcome was. And so I hear what you're saying, like that is the protocol. What internal mechanisms do you all have in place to see if you all are in fact living up to that protocol?
Sure. So what we've done recently, council member, is we have an online tracking system of complaints, so that way we can see where we are in complaints. We also are in the process of completely overhauling our online system to be more transparent and give the community and ANCs more access to information. Ultimately, we want the ANCs and community groups to be able to just go onto the website and just look up a status. So that's where we're headed.
I see. So that everything should be digital ultimately.
Correct. That's the goal, is to put everything online and digital. It does a couple things. One, it makes this as transparent as possible. Two, it allows the public to get their information on the website without having to get anybody on the phone or tracking them down. So that's where we're headed.
And what's the timeline for that?
We should have that up and running within the next 12 months. We already are working to get the first phase built out, which is giving licensees access to everything online. And then from there, we'll be moving to the community outreach portion, if you want to call it that. I also want to just kind of clarify, we have an online complaint system that's fairly recent. And so that's kind of happened after you got a lot of these complaints. So that has helped us track the complaints and making sure we're being more responsive, if that makes sense.
No, it does. No, thank you for that. And I know we spoke at length yesterday about the medical cannabis shops. And I would just say again, I appreciate APCA's focus on enforcing the law and cracking down on these illegal shops. In Ward 5, I think it's safe to say we support licensed, properly vetted businesses, but we also don't want all of these shops locating in our communities. And there should be an effort of the board to ensure that they're located equitably across the district. But thank you for your focus on the enforcement piece.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'll make sure to pass that on to the board as well. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. Let me get back to just some of the enforcement questions and pick up where I left off from the last round. Director Musali, you recommended yesterday that the council amend the law to allow the agency to summarily close a business through notice of the closure to the landlord. We also heard some witness testimony around this point. Do you have any concerns that in an environment where it's often difficult for prospective business owners to find compliant spaces, that this action will potentially scare landlords away from leasing to legal business owners?
Thank you for that question, Chairperson McDuffie. I think the way to address that is make it clear is the summary closure on the landlord is only for unlicensed businesses. We don't need that authority for licensed businesses. So the landlord, if they have assurance or some type of documentation showing that it's a licensed business, then they won't have to worry about that.
Got it. Okay. I appreciate that response. We also heard a lot of testimony yesterday about the need to expand signage advertising for legal cannabis businesses. You were in the hearing room listening intently as I was. Is there room to grow what the ABC board has done through emergency rulemaking without running afoul of restrictions put in place to protect children?
100%. So, Chairperson McDuffie, we recently did sign and advertising emergency rules in order to allow these businesses to advertise and help promote their businesses. We'll make sure we have a stakeholder meeting in March with all the legal businesses. So we'll give them another opportunity to provide comment on that rulemaking. If there's other aspects that they want to expand on it, we're happy to do that. That rulemaking ultimately will have to come to you guys for approval.
Okay. All right. As well, yesterday a witness testified that the district considered mirroring their registration process with Maryland by allowing anonymous purchases with ID verification. Is that really something that's feasible given the district's medical market?
So yeah, we heard in terms of like just checking your ID, which obviously is more of an adult cannabis sale program, not medical. But what I think I heard yesterday, which we have been working on, which addresses the point, is streamlining the online registration system to allow the dispensaries or retailers to register patients themselves. So we're currently working on that online system. And so we believe that's going to be a game changer in terms of helping dispensaries register patients, put a less burden on the patient, addresses most of the concerns we heard yesterday.
Well, let me ask you a little bit, explore that a bit with you. Like, do you have a sense of where things are with that online system? And is there a time frame where you expect it would be up and running?
Yeah, we expect it to be up and running in the next couple of months. The biggest issue we had, which we're working through with cannabis being federally illegal, was the payment system. So we've had to work with
Say that again. I'm sorry, I missed that.
The online payment system. Because of the fact that cannabis is federally illegal, we had to explain to the banks why we wanted to do this and why it was okay to do it. And we've gotten through that, I believe.
Okay. We were happy at the committee to see that you exceeded your SBE spend goal for fiscal year 2024. How is your work with SBEs and CBEs really impacted your agency? Have you seen any challenges with identifying appropriate eligible CBEs and SBEs to participate in the spend at the agency?
Thank you for that, Chairperson. No, it's gone really well. We have on the alcohol side, longstanding relationships with SBEs, minority-owned businesses, that we have a great working relationship that have done excellent work for us. So we've continued that. On the cannabis side, we've been fortunate where we've been able to identify new CBEs to do cannabis work with additional SBEs, and that's let us succeed our goal, as you know, noted, I think every year for a long time since I've been director.
Okay. Just to pivot in a bit to alcohol, pardon me for a second. Aside from the omnibus alcohol beverage bill that you referenced in your opening testimony, APCA also listed the Licensing Clarification Amendment Act of 2025, the Distributor Program and Protest Process Emergency Amendment Act of 2025, the Craft Preparation Endorsement Bill, and the Noise Balance Amendment Act as legislative priorities for this fiscal year. Could you briefly walk us through your anticipated timeline for the executive to introduce the measures that I just outlined?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the Streetery bill, I believe, is in IQ. So the goal is to get that down to you all as soon as possible. That bill was already drafted and introduced, so it was, obviously having to change the year on the bill. But we expect that to be very, very soon. I think that one's pretty much ready to go. The craft preparation endorsement bill is in IQ. We expect that to come down. I think I wanted to highlight that language was, we work collaboratively with the Department of Building Zoning. They had a huge role in that language. And so that bill has a legal sufficiency and is going through IQ. So we expect that to be with you shortly. The Licensing Clarification Amendment Act of 2025 is also drafted, has already gotten legal sufficiency from OAG, and I believe should be, or if not, will soon be in the IQ system. Noise Balance Amendment Act is also drafted, has gone through legal sufficiency. So that should hopefully also be going through the IQ system. If it hasn't, should be soon. And then finally, the omnibus bill you mentioned, that is anticipated to be introduced to the council in the spring, is what's been told of us.
Okay, I appreciate you sharing that. You have reported pending investigation in the matter of, if this is County Gilliam versus the Alcohol Beverage Regulation Administration. What's the status of that case, and anything you can explain to share on the record at this point, given that it's pending? Any details that you might be able to share?
Sure. I mean, I think the only thing I'll say at this point is that the Office of Human Rights is in the process of finalizing their investigation. So they're in the process of wrapping that up and finalizing it. So I'm not going to say anything more than that. Obviously, we can keep the committee updated. But we've been working with the Office of Human Rights we've been working with them on that.
Got it. Okay. You also noted that a former APCA employee filed a complaint with the Office of Human Rights. Is there anything you can share about that beyond what you shared in your pre-hearing information?
So in addition to the one employee I mentioned, there is a former employee who filed an Office of Human Rights complaint, who also filed a lawsuit against several district agencies. In January 2025, OAG notified us that case had been dismissed by the court. The court did give the plaintiff the opportunity to file an amended complaint after the initial complaint was dismissed. And so an amended complaint was filed. OAG has until later this month to file a response to the amended complaint.
Okay. Okay. And in your pre-hearing responses, you noted that APCA does not track protest data by ward, location, and license type. However, as we understand it, this information is provided to APCA when a protest is filed. Are there any other additional opportunities here to enhance the protest process so that important data may be collected?
If that's something the committee is interested in, we could clearly track that data by ward. We're able to easily track addresses by ward and ANC. That information is on the placard that we post. So we could take that information if that's something the committee is interested in and easily track that information. It would not
Okay,
be very
appreciate
difficult.
that. Okay. I talked a little bit about you answered some questions earlier about the agency's noise complaints, and I want to talk a little bit more here about that. It looks like you're on track to receive more complaints this year than you received last year, and so have you had any follow-up conversations with the Department of Buildings regarding the rewrite of its noise regulations? This has been sort of a hot button issue. It's come up in a number of different contexts and not just APCA enforcement. So I'm curious as to whether or not you've had some follow-up conversations with DOB and how will your proposed Noise Balance Amendment Act work with DOB and its work?
Sure. Well, we have had a number of conversations with the DOB. I'm sure, as you're aware, Chairperson, there's been a lot of noise laws that were passed at the end of the last council period here. That resulted in a number of discussions with DOB and other district government agencies. So yes, we are having an ongoing dialogue with them on that. The whole purpose of the Noise Balance Amendment Act that you mentioned is taking into account all these noise complaints. There's certain aspects of the law that make it challenging for us to enforce noise laws, so that legislation is intended to address that. And certain exemptions, what have you. There's also, just kind of highlight, I know this isn't probably a shock, but a lot of residents don't want us coming in their home at 3 or 4 in the morning. So this allows us to, legislation allows us to address noise complaints and noise issues without necessarily having to go into a resident's home, if that helps.
What about sort of enforcement around noise complaints in mixed-use developments, multifamily developments? Any additional steps taken to determine how the district can better enforce noise complaints in those types of buildings?
Sure. Well, this legislation helps to address that a little bit. I think also the legislation that just passed in terms of soundproofing, notification to residents and mixed uses, I think is helpful too. So I think that's been helpful, but I think this legislation will partially address that as well.
Got it. Let's talk about reimbursable detail subsidy program. It's something that is really popular in the District of Columbia, and it had been utilized pretty extensively by our nightlife community in particular. But it looks like in FY 2024, the program only spent approximately $380,000 of its almost $870,000 budget. First of all, is that accurate? And if so, can you talk about why that is? And the significant gap seems unusual for the program.
Sure. I believe that's accurate. I'm going to let Rebecca Berry just verify that number that we have, and then I'll answer your question.
Okay.
Yes, that number is accurate. $380,797 was what was spent in FY 24.
Okay.
So to answer your question, Chairperson McDuffie, I'd say there's 2 reasons for the lower number. One, in talking to MPD, so anything I'm saying here, they're aware I'm going to say. is they had a number of mandatory activations in 24 that made it difficult for them to staff it. So part of the reason the number is down is you can request it, the reimbursable detail, but if MPD doesn't have any able to staff it, then obviously you're not going to have licensees paying for detail that MPD didn't staff.
Yeah.
So
So just to understand, were there fewer MPD officers participating in the program in FY24 than there were in FY23?
what was
You know
represented,
that?
what was represented to me by MPD is that they had more mandatory activations, and so they were able to staff the RDO program less in 24 compared to F2023. They
Got it.
couldn't staff it.
Do you know, can you talk about the number of requests with the program from businesses? Or did those track less, more than the prior year?
Yeah, I'll see if I have that for you. You can give me a minute. I think the other hot
Okay,
thing
sure.
worth highlighting is that we did have some compared to previous years. We did have some bids and licensees stop making requests for financial reasons. You know, they notified us that financially that they were not going to participate in the program for financial reasons. So I think that's the other part I want to highlight. I'll try and find the number here.
Okay.
So give me 1 second. Hold on.
Sure, take your time.
I'm ready, Chairperson. So I think in kind of looking at the numbers, so for 23 we had 52 participants. In 24 we had 37. So it went from 52 to 37 from between 23 and 24.
Okay.
Now 22 was only 35, so that 24 is actually a little higher. But I think the point to make is when you have like a bid that stops it, obviously a bid is a major financial component to it. So that obviously,
Right. Do you know, are you familiar with there's a new program though implemented? My staff might have to help me with this. I think it may have been in the budget for FY24. I'm sure it was around where the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice issued grants specifically to bids around public safety along their corridors. I wonder if there was some decisions made around how they. I'm curious. I'm kind of thinking out loud. It's probably not the most appropriate place to do this, but I love to, Director Musali, have you speak with us at the committee about the Safe Commercial Corridors grants. Not that you should have that on your radar. We have it on ours, but I'm curious as whether or not there's some correlation between increased spending there and less requests of the reimbursable detail program.
I'd be happy to do that, Chairperson. Happy to have that discussion.
Okay. All right. And then just also thinking about your prior response that you got from MPD about the mandatory activations. I'm also curious as to whether or not, and maybe this is more appropriate for our staff to follow up or maybe reach out to the Committee on Public Safety and Judiciary, but were there more mandatory events or activations that MPD had to participate in FY24 than there were in FY23? I'm curious as to exploring in greater detail the response that you got from MPD about this. They've always been a great partner with that program, and just curious to know a little bit more about that response. But then also, we don't have any additional public witness testimony at this point in our performance oversight cycle. But have you heard challenges with getting reimbursable details when requested?
The only point I made that I heard was in some instances they were requested reimbursable detail and they weren't able to be staffed. That's the only thing I've heard.
Okay. Okay. And I appreciate that. I'm happy for us to continue that conversation offline, but I'd love to delve a little deeper to understand the lack of spending on that program. So
Happy to do that.
because I'm still, and the reason I'm doing that, Director, is because I still hear the concerns around public safety from businesses, particularly those in our nightlife community. So I want to reconcile what I've heard from the community of small businesses with the spending in that program. I'm gonna move along though, not to belabor the point. Does the department have a sexual harassment officer, and has it received any allegations of sexual harassment in fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 to date?
Thank you for that question. We have a sexual harassment officer. We have a alternate sexual harassment officer as required by the mayor's order that was issued on October 31st, 2023, which is the policy that the agency follows. We have not received any sexual harassment complaints in the last several years.
Okay. And what about union grievances? Have any unions filed grievances with the agency in fiscal year 2024 or fiscal year 2025 to date?
We have not received any union grievances. We have a good, if not great, working relationship with our union. So we meet quarterly and work with issues on them. They've been fantastic.
Okay. I think I have asked all of the questions that I prepared and you have answered thus far. Everything that we asked. Is there anything else that you would like to add to the record before we transition to our next agency on the agenda today?
No, I just want to thank you and your team. You have a great staff. They're enjoyable to work with, and look forward to continuing to work with you on legislative issues, both regarding alcohol and cannabis.
Thank you, Director Musali. I appreciate it. Thank you to you and to Rebecca Berry and your team for your testimony this morning and your responses to our pre-hearing questions. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to turn next to Real Property Tax Appeals Commission. They're the final agency that we're going to hear from today. The commission is tasked with the role of providing real property assessment appeals hearings for the district residents and businesses. RIPTAC, as it's also referred to. They have a goal to ensure that on appeal, real properties are assessed at 100% of market value based on properties similar in size and utility, so that an equitable tax burden is shared across businesses. I'm now going to call our government witness for the commission. It's Executive Director Andegar, and I believe we have the Chairman Williams is present as well. Before you begin your testimony, though, I'd love to have you all turn on your videos and raise your right hands to be sworn in. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. I'm going to swear. Is it just one witness testifying this morning? And if you can unmute yourself. Because the video has the executive director's name.
I think I was given his link. I'm the agency fiscal officer for the agency. So I'm gonna pause and wait for the director to show up, the executive.
Okay, I appreciate that. Let's we'll pause and give him a couple of minutes to show up. So I'll go off camera until we have him on our I'm checking in with the team. Do we know where the executive director is? What's the status? Yeah.
I'm still on the phone with him. We're still trying to work out the technical difficulties.
Okay. All right. I want to do a quick check-in with Basola Walker. And there was somebody else on from the Real Property Tax Appeals Commission. I thought the chairman had logged in. I'm not Basola Walker. I'm sorry. There were two people on. There were the AFO and the chairman from the Real Property Tax Commission. I'm wondering where they're gone. Are they in the waiting room, Daniel?
The AFO was just re-added to the panel, and the chairman is no longer on the Zoom.
Could somebody from the Real Property Tax Commission shed some light on what we're waiting for at this point?
Okay, I'm here if you can hear me. This is Trent
I can
Williams.
certainly hear you.
Okay, great. I
can
was
certainly hear you.
I was on earlier. I was told to go off and then to come back on, and so I apologize. It took a little longer than I thought it would, but I am here.
Okay. Can you check in with
Yes, sir.
the team at the Real Property Tax Appeals Commission?
Yes, sir. I will I'll do that right now.
Yeah, and then let us know within the next 5 minutes what their status is. We'd like to be able to move forward with this hearing.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate you being on. I appreciate the AFO being on, but we obviously need the executive director to join the Zoom hearing. Okay?
Yes, sir. I'll come right back on.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Council member, this is Marquez. You can start.
Well, unfortunately, Marquez, I can't start because the executive director from the Real Property Tax Commission has not joined the Zoom yet.
Okay, just letting you know on our end, we prepared.
Oh no, I know you all are prepared. I'm sorry, I mentioned Basola mistakenly, and I should not mention. I know you all are prepared. There seems to be some challenge with the Real Property Tax Appeals Commission, and we're trying to get them on the Zoom so we can begin. So we're waiting for them at this point.
Hi. So the update is I may have received the same link as the executive director. He's asking me to log off, have a new link sent to me, and then I'll join with the new link that's sent to me because I believe, from what I can understand, he can't come on unless I come off.
I'm fairly certain that you all got the same link.
We sent individual links to each of you, so if you would just use your personalized panelist link and log off of this one and see if that will work.
Okay, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go away and come right back on with the link that was sent by your office. Thank you.
Okay, CM, the director is on the Zoom now, and so is I believe Trent Williams is here too. Yes.
Okay. If you all could raise your right hands to be sworn in. And unmute yourselves. Okay. If you could both raise your right hands, I'm going to swear you in now. Do you each swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to provide before the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You're muted, Mr. Williams.
I do.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you all joining. I'm going to turn to the director for your testimony. You have 7 minutes.
Good morning, Chairperson McDuffie and members of the committee. I am Gazacho Ndarga, Director of the Real Property Tax Appeals Commission, also known as RIPTAC. I thank you for this opportunity to appear before you to discuss the performance of the Real Property Tax Appeals Commission for fiscal year 2025. For tax year 2024, season ended February 1st, 2024, the Commission processed a total of 3,900 valuation cases, 2,557 Class 1 residential valuation cases, and 1,343 Class 2 commercial valuation cases, including mixed use. There were 21 classification cases originating from the Department of Buildings, DOB, and 15 homestead cases where no valuation is considered. There were 113 cases withdrawn, plus 282 cases resolved by way of stipulation agreement. I am happy to report that in tax year 2004, it was a productive and efficient year for RIPTAC. Most notably, RIPTAC was successful in completing nearly 100% of its hearings by the statutory deadline of February 1. We were also successful in completing nearly all the decisions by this date as well. As the committee knows, completing hearings and decisions by this date is procedurally important so that third-level cases, if any, with DC Superior Court can be filed on time, and the Office of Tax and Revenue, OTR, are able to punctually assess real property in time for the new tax season. Technology is a mainstay for the Commission. Property owners steadily use online appeals submission platform, File and Serve Express, to file their petitions. File and Serve Express is the same platform OTR and DC Superior Court uses, demonstrating the importance of this contract investment in increasing efficiency and convenience. In tax year 24, 98% of cases were filed electronically. Electronic filings provide greater efficiency in record access and record keeping among all parties. Other technology-based process improvements include continuing to use WebEx as the virtual hearing platform. This platform facilitates efficiency because there is no lag between hearings. Commissioners, hearing examiners, and petitioners can smoothly transition between cases and make better use of their time if they finish hearings earlier than scheduled. For example, commissioners and hearing examiners usually use surplus time to deliberate and draft decisions, which helps to reduce backlog during the busier periods of the tax season. These and other efficiencies are important when commissioners and hearing examiners are hearing thousands of cases over a 5-month appeals season. The current tax year 2025, is equally successful. This year, RIPTAC is operating with 0 vacancies, a first in over 4 years. At the beginning of the fiscal year, RIPTAC onboarded a new vice chairman and a new hearing examiner. The increased capacity is important to facilitate a smooth and efficient appeals season. I am pleased to report that RIPTAC again completed the current tax year on January 31st before the February 1 statutory requirement. RIPTAC received fewer cases this year compared to last year, This, coupled with a full staffing, contributed to a more manageable caseload. As I have cautioned in the past, if significantly more assessments are appealed, additional capacity may be required to meet our statutory obligations. As of right now, this does not look to be the forecast, but RIPTAC will have a clear idea in the summer after first level appeals are submitted. RIPTAC usually receives about 50% of first level appeals. This concludes my testimony. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you, and I will take questions that you or the committee may have at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. I do have a few questions for you, if you give me one.
CM, you're currently on mute.
Thank you, Donnie. In your pre-hearing responses, Director, you stated that the commission is fully staffed with 0 vacancies, but then later mentioned to us in those responses that the commission was unable to complete its residential and commercial deadlines within 30 and 80 days, respectively. If you could reconcile that for us and talk about your staffing and whether or not there are additional staffing needs.
Thank you for the question. Just to clarify, the tax year versus the fiscal years are slightly different. They do overlap a little bit, but just by a little bit. So in answering the questions, I was reflecting on tax year 2024. And so that was last year's season. And that was from mainly September through February of last year, so 2023 through 2024. And at that time, we did not have a full staff. In fiscal year 2025, from late October, early November 2024 to the current time, to the present time, we now have a full staff. So in the previous tax year, we were not fully staffed. We didn't have a vice chair. And so that did have an impact on our ability to complete decisions within the time frame specific to residential and commercial cases, those being 30 days and 80 days, respectively.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. We were happy to see the committee that in tax years 24 and 25, all hearings were completed by February 1st. However, was hoping you could specifically address whether residential decisions were completed within 30 days and whether the commercial decisions were completed within 80 days. So if you could just sort of delve a little bit more deeply into that and share with us the results, and did the commission achieve their goals in FY24? And if not, what will the commission do in 25 to meet those goals?
Thank you for the question. I think the main hurdle in that sense is the number of cases that commissioners and hearing examiners hear. When we do not have as many commissioners or rather a full staff as has been the case for the past 4 years, that means that scheduling can be a little bit tight. So the committee may be aware that mainly during the height of the season, usually beginning October through the end of January, commissioners, hearing examiners that is, RIPTAC is hosting 2 panels a day, Monday through Friday. And so that means that at minimum, we are having 3 panelists hearing these cases. The past tax year, we had 9 panelists, commissioners and hearing examiners. I'll refer to those as panelists moving forward. Mm-hmm. We had 9 panelists. And so depending on the caseload for those 2 panels each day, that might mean that panelists may have 1 to 2 days of drafting decisions. In some cases, mm-hmm. This is fine for some of our more seasoned panelists, but for some of the other panelists who are still learning the ropes, that means that they may need a little bit more time drafting those decisions. And when you're hearing cases as heavily as you are during that time frame, usually October through January, it mm-hmm. can caseload can build up. And so there is a focus on, from an administrative perspective.
Hey, Donnie, are you hearing the executive director? On my end, it appears to have frozen.
Yes, I can hear him.
Can Councilmember, if you let me know the last thing you heard, I can continue from there.
I heard you. It's the connection's on my end, but I also have backup on my phone, so you can continue.
Okay. Basically, the case schedule can be pretty heavy. And so that means there's administratively, we are putting a focus on hearing all of those cases, and mm-hmm. so that we are done at least by February 1. And then there's a focus on drafting those decisions. Sometimes cases decisions aren't drafted within the 30 or 80 day requirement. And so that leads to a lag later in the season.
And if I could add 2 things. The first would be that we, of course, would prioritize. We ask commissioners and hearing examiners to prioritize their residential decisions because it's within 30 days. And as you can imagine, that can come so much faster. So we try to get those to the staff as soon as possible to make sure that we're prioritizing residential cases first. The other thing I'll say is that from time to time, there are cases that the parties are planning to stipulate. And so if there is a potential stipulation, rather than having a conflict where our commission writes a decision and then a stipulation comes in and then there's potentially confusion on which one matters most, of course, we want the stipulation to take place. And so there's an opportunity for us to communicate with the parties to get the fully executed stipulation agreement to our office as soon as possible. And as you can imagine, from time to time, that may conflict with those 30 or 80 days.
Right. Well, talk a little bit about the number of appeals that were filed in actually tax year 2024 as compared to tax year 2023. I don't know if you all have thoughts about the number of appeals dropping in 2024. Is there anything you all can attribute that significant drop to?
Giz, did you have a comment on? Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman. I think I would defer to you on that.
Again, I think that there's probably two main factors that play into that. The first and probably most important is that the parties, the petitioner and the Office of Tax and Revenue are getting it right at the first level. We're only going to see cases that are appealed after a first level decision. And so if they can come to terms at the first level, then those are cases that are not going to come our way. And so I think that's an important part, that the parties are getting it right at the first level. I think also we're seeing that the impact from the pandemic has slowed a bit. I'm not saying it's totally gone. There are still going to be some industries and some sectors that are feeling it a little more than others, but you're seeing that the impact is not as large as it was the year before, and I think we'll potentially see that going forward.
Okay, and then I look at the ward numbers, which you all provided to the committee, so we appreciate that. You look at the significant number of appeals in Ward 2, where our central business district is, and then you look at Ward 7, where we had the fewest number of appeals were filed in the District of Columbia. I don't know if you have thoughts on what that is attributable to, and whether my concern is whether residents, homeowners, are familiar and knowledgeable about their ability, right, to appeal decisions. Do you normally see these types of numbers and just sort of the significant differences between the amount of appeals filed in, for example, Ward 7, which was 89, versus, and I guess we can expect a significant number of Ward 2 appeals, but 1,081 appeals in Ward 2, just to bring the point home for people who might be at home listening and less familiar with you all's work. 1,081 appeals in Ward 2, and 89 appeals in Ward 7, 269 in Ward 8.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it may be mainly the fact that there is less knowledge or information that appealing at multiple levels, specifically the second level, is an option. I think that may be it. I also think that there may be some fatigue on that part as well. I don't know what OTR's numbers are in terms of what the appeals count is at the first level. But generally speaking, we normally see 50% of what OTR receives at the second level. And if that percentage were to carry over equally, it's still a relatively low number. Again, I don't know exactly what OTR is seeing at the ward level, specifically in Ward 7. But I think that it might be a lack of information. And in my professional capacity as well as in my personal capacity, I do make it a point when we were talking about district government and my work specifically with district government, that homeowners are aware that it is an option to appeal their taxes at multiple levels, not just at the first level.
Okay. And then note that you all at the commission noted that limiting the taxable value of homes is, in your opinion, more beneficial for low and fixed income residents than holding the assessed values of homes lower than actual market value. I just wanted to get your thoughts on why you believe that to be the case.
The commission
was that.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, sir. I was going to say the commission, one of our main objectives is the true market value of the property. And so because we're looking for, the market value, and we want to also think about equalization. In other words, all properties that are the same or valued the same, limiting or holding the market value would be potentially become troublesome, because then there wouldn't necessarily be equalization amongst the properties. And so now there would be an impact on the calculations of how each neighborhood is being valued. Whereas if we were to focus in on the taxable value, we're still saying that your property is worth potentially a higher number, but what you would be taxed on could potentially change. That would not impact the true market value of those properties.
Yeah, I appreciate that response, Chairman. And I asked that question because I think it's important for ordinary residents to really understand not only the work that you all are doing, but just sort of some of the considerations that you just laid out. And then along those lines, I appreciated that you all have been holding meetings with ANCs to discuss the tax appeals process. I believe last year we talked about some of the challenges you all faced in really getting out to the community and really getting responses from ANCs, et cetera. Have you all also used these opportunities to discuss the tax relief programs through the Office of Tax and Revenue? How are you all engaging ANCs around your work?
Yeah, thank you for that question as well, council member. It's actually been unfortunate. And in my responses, I'm not sure if I said that. Rather, I think I did say that we reach out to ANCs as well as civic associations, but I have not received a positive response, or really a response. I shouldn't say positive or negative, but a response at all in terms of being invited to speak to ANCs about what RIPTAC does, what the appeals process is. And I think that may be part of the issue as to why we don't get the number of appeals at the second level, particularly from Ward 7 and or Ward 8. It's not without effort. I mean, we certainly reach out to them on an annual basis. We're preparing to do that again at the end of this month, as OTR is preparing to send out their tax year 26 assessments in March. But to date, we have not gotten, in the past 2 years at least, we have not gotten a response to come and speak.
And if I could add something to a few of the last questions that I think would be important to note. Our commission receives potential appeals after there's a first level appeal that the parties don't agree to. And so we should, as a commission, speaking to the executive director, we should look at the numbers from OTR to us. Because if OTR is getting it right at the first level, potentially for Ward 7 and Ward 8, then we would not see those appeals. And so I don't necessarily want to put a full negative spin on it, because I think that potentially with residents where owners are coming into the first level with valid information and showing that their property value should be potentially lower, and the OTR agreeing, we would not see that case. And thank you. And so I would encourage all residents from all wards, and especially Ward 7 and 8, to know that if you're not happy with your first level appeal, that you can appeal it to our RIPTAC commission, the second level of appeal. But if you're happy with it, then again, we would not see that case.
And to follow up on that as well, the decision there, this information is made available to all property owners and residents in the district when they do get that the decision notice at the first level from OTR. If they choose to appeal it again, there is language in that the decision that they have the opportunity to do so, and what that time frame is and where to do it. So
and I'll say we make sure to express when they're in front of us that there's a third level of appeal to the Superior Court. And so again, as the executive director stated, we are forthcoming with the information. We want everyone to know their opportunities. At the same time, we hope that relief can be received at the first level, at the second level, and if necessary, at the third.
Okay. And you all were helpful in providing the total number of homes assessed at the second level in each of the last 5 tax years. As a follow-up, could you all provide the committee with that same data by ward breakdown and tax year? Is that possible?
Sorry, I missed the first part of the question, Councilmember. Oh, is this question number 76, I think, in the...
Let's see.
The average
I
assessed...
have all of your pre-hearing questions.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, actually.
I think
My
you're
staff can
saying,
probably
would there be an opportunity to look at the past few years and where the number of appeals that we've received? I believe.
Yeah, and then broken down by ward and tax year.
I believe we do have that. I think that's something that we could do.
Yeah, we pull a lot of our data through OTR. OTR is the main data house, and so they're able to parse through that. So we can make that request if we don't already have it.
Okay, and then in terms of the second level appeals that you all see, are those individuals who appeal to you all? It's the best way to ask this question. Are you seeing, not that you all are court, but are you seeing individuals appeal representing the appellants, or are you seeing people appeal sort of pro se as homeowners or commercial property owners? Are they appealing themselves, or are they appealing with representation before your commission?
We see a bit of both, and I would say more with residential, it would be the property owner. From time to time, they will have a representative, or they'll bring in an expert to speak on their behalf, potentially about an appraisal or some other financial matter. When we get to commercial cases, we usually have a representative. And so for commercial cases, we'll have an agent. I would say for residential cases, we're more often than not hearing from the owner.
Okay. All right. Let me ask a question I've asked of all of the agencies that appear before the committee. Does the commission have a sexual harassment officer, and has the position been vacant at any point during the current fiscal year or the prior fiscal year, 2024?
Yes, the commission does have an SHO, and I am that person. There's never been a time since the mayor's order that the commission has not been without an SHO.
Okay, and have you had any complaints filed in fiscal years 2024 or 2025 to date?
The commission has not.
Okay. Give me one moment, please. I'm going to circle back in just a moment. I know we had a bit of some technical difficulties with the commission. I just wanted to check in with my staff before I adjourned the meeting, and that's what I did a moment ago. Is there anything else that either of you would like to add to the record before I adjourn this hearing?
I'd just like to say thank you for your time. Thank you for your support, and we appreciate it. And we look forward to, again, spreading the word that we are here for the second level appeal and doing all that we can for the district residents.
Thank you.
I echo that sentiment. I echo that sentiment and share that thanks as well with you, council member, as well as your staff, who've been really great to work with.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you to you both and for being here. I want to thank everybody who testified before the Committee on Business and Economic Development today. This marks the end of today's performance oversight hearing. The committee will convene again at 9:30 a.m. on Wednesday, February 19th, to discuss the performance of the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, the Office of Lottery and Gaming, and the Department of Small and Local Business Development. There being no further business before the committee, the time is now 9:40 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.